had time to catch him.
All right, John McClain, Hall of Fame columnist with us. NFL draft is over as they move on now eventually to whatever else is on the schedule next, which would be workouts, et cetera, and that's changed too. John, thank you very much. What storyline or five, with all of your insight and knowledge, was the one or two that came out to you the most?
The biggest to me is the biggest to everybody was the Falcons taking Michael Penix with the 8th pick, which is the worst move I've seen in my 48 years covering the draft. Has nothing to do with Penix, everything to do with Kirk Cousins. And there's just so many reasons it doesn't work. If assuming Cousins is healthy and Michael Penix Jr. turns 24 in May, and even the GM, Terry Fontenot, said, well, if he doesn't play for 4 or 5 years, that's a good thing for us. And I'm thinking I feel terrible for Penix to be drafted there, because Cousins signed that 4-year contract worth $180 million, including $90 million guaranteed, $62.5 million guaranteed this year. Arthur Blank, I think, is 82, and the reason he wanted them to pay whatever it took to get Cousins, he wants to win now. He wants to win the NFC South to dethrone the Buccaneers, and they're favored to do it. But then they could have their choice of any defensive player for a pass rush that's been basically awful and hasn't had a legitimate pass rusher since defensive end John Abraham in the early 2000s, and they had their choice of all of them. And I wonder, what are the odds that Fontenot will still be the GM when he plays, and Raheem Morris will still be the head coach, because they just fired Arthur Smith after 3 years. And then they invite controversy. If Kirk Cousins throws 2 interceptions in a game, or if he throws one in the end zone when they got a chance to win, fans and media are going to howl for Michael Penix Jr., and that's the kind of distraction the team doesn't need. And the other one was the Cowboys running back situation. And I can't imagine they think that Zeke Elliott's going to come in there and do for them now what he did in 2016 through 2020. And maybe Dowdle's going to go to the Hall of Fame, but I was reading this week about them going to use running back by committee. And when you do that, usually it means you don't have one. And there was a lot of talk about Jonathan Brooks, and I think there was so much talk about Brooks and the Cowboys, the Panthers traded up ahead of them so they could draft Brooks. But it just puts more pressure on Dak Prescott, on his shoulders. And to me, he needs a running game to help take off some of that pressure.
John, the Cowboys seem to be doing this all backwards right now. And you listen to Jerry Jones talk, and it feels like he thinks he's outsmarted the rest of the league. But what do you think this means? I mean, look, if they don't win, Mike McCarthy's gone. All these things are going to change. Like, they still need to get Dak done. And there's this thought that maybe he's going to push it and see if they don't get a new quarterback. Does it seem like Jerry, after a while of being pretty steady and the Cowboys of building their roster, are going on to kind of old school, throwing it against the wall and seeing if it works?
Well, that's not a formula that's tried and true, of course, Paul. And it's almost like they know some things we don't know about their talent, that some back is going to emerge, that the players they lost can be replaced. I think if he gets Prescott signed and he gets to see Lamb signed, people will be happy, and he's not going to let Micah Parsons get away. But if I'm Dak and I'm thinking, okay, this time next year, any team that needs a quarterback, I can be available to him. And it's going to be very tempting for him to test the market. On the other hand, I'm sure he loves Dallas, sure he loves the Cowboys. But does he believe that, say, Jerry and Steven are the problem when it comes to procuring players? Because he certainly doesn't believe he's the problem when they lose in the playoffs. But that's going to be so interesting. I still think they'll get it done, and it's going to cost them a lot of money. But right now, there just doesn't seem any rhyme or reason behind this offseason. I love their drafting the linemen, but this was a deep draft for running backs, not in the first round, but starting in the second and really in the third, fourth, and even the fifth. And I just think they could have used one of them.
John, the Texans with a solid draft from all indications, but I'll reserve judgment to you because you obviously study this much closer. There wasn't a lot of in the way of splashes this go round for Houston, but what did you think of what they were able to get done with their numerous picks?
They had 9 picks. They drafted 5 defensive, 4 offensive. They love to draft guys who are captains. And they say it's not a criteria, but they do like it if the guy's a captain because it shows what his teammates think about his leadership. Kamari Lassiter, the corner from Georgia, was a 2-time captain, 2-time national champion. He can play inside or outside. And every player Nick Caserio drafts is someone D'Amico Ryans wants. So if D'Amico thinks I got to have Kamari Lassiter over some of these other corners, I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt. Now, I thought they'd take a defensive tackle with the other pick in the second round, and they took an offensive tackle, which surprised me, a redshirt sophomore from Notre Dame, Blake Fisher. And I don't think he'll play this year unless somebody gets hurt, but he could be starting next year. And then he took a safety, Callum Bullock, from USC, 6'2", 188, who ran in the 4.4s. They need a guy playing with Jalen Petrie at some point who can cover a lot of ground and play deep and let Petrie work the middle of the field, play around the line of scrimmage, blitz a little bit. And one of the things they did on their last, 6 picks, they were all in college at least 5 years, and one of them was in college 6 years. So they think if you're playing at a big-time program, and Nick Caserio has never drafted a player from a non-Power 5 conference. And if you think all that experience will help their transition to the NFL, that's something they believe in. And boy, they took everybody. You know, I love the NFL draft when it's over because we don't see one and dones. You know, you see one and dones like he's He's probably gonna get pushed all over the D League because he's just not strong. He needs to add weight and strength, and he could have used another year of playing major college basketball. And so many guys who are one and done don't pan out. And so I like the way the NFL today that you can have 3 years of experience and still just be a redshirt sophomore when you come into the draft.
So the Cowboys had that philosophy, and I'm not sure other teams did too, drafting guys from Michigan, Bama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma. But they went into the Western. Well, now who's the defensive end they got this year?
Marshawn Kneeland.
Yeah, where'd he go?
In Western Michigan.
Western Michigan. But that's not a bad idea, unless it's just somebody that jumps off the map at you when it comes to a player that you're going to get drafted. What are your thoughts about how Detroit showed up in droves with a huge crowd during the 3 days with the NFL draft?
And by the way, I thought the Kneeland pick was really good because he was very highly rated. Cowboys did great along their fronts. And it's just that the others are suspect. As far as Detroit, they did a great job. That city's been down and out so many times. And the fact that it's the place to be now, they got very lucky with the weather. The first night the media was in there, second night on Wednesday, it get down to 40. But it was great. Didn't rain, didn't snow, and it was just a great show. And that Lions blue, that powder blue, you know, it shows from the drone shots and everything. And I thought it just looked great. And they used to be commended. And I don't know how in the world they ever have an estimate about how many people are actually there. Whatever they say is fine. I love the way they're going to rotate it around now. Can't wait to see it in Green Bay, and have no idea where they're going to be able to put it, but it's going to be fun. And I hope sometime they put it in Canton. Canton, Ohio's got a lot of places you can put the draft, and originally I didn't like the idea of rotating it out of New York. I used to go to New York every year for it. It was a great time. Thought it would be a disaster. It's just like everything the NFL does when it comes to promotion. it works big time.
John, your wife and Garrett and Smokey and Craig's beloved Washington Commanders had the first draft in the post-Snyder era, and it's the first draft since Daniel Snyder that I think there's like legitimate top-to-bottom optimism in. What did you think about what they did?
There should be. You know, there's no way people couldn't be fired up about that, Paul, beginning with quarterback Jaden Daniels. They hope they're not picking there anymore. You know, they added to their defensive line, and, you know, they've gotten rid of a couple of those, their best linemen, because they couldn't pay everybody. But they got receivers, they got defensive linemen, they got running back, and they've got to give him a chance to develop. But man, if I'm a Commanders fan, I'm pumped, and I know they eat up all that positive publicity because they're still trying to get a new stadium, hopefully in the district, and I hope they do, because there was nothing like RFK Stadium.
John, how did you watch the draft?
It was the first time in 48 years since I left the Waco Tribune-Herald to come to the Chronicle to cover hockey. And then when I moved over to the Oilers, that I had not been at the Oilers headquarters, the NFL, or the Texans headquarters at NRG Stadium. And the reason was I was in the hospital the week before with pneumonia, and I just didn't want to go over there, spend all 6 hours a day around a bunch of people in a confined space.
Yeah.
So it's the first time I was able to watch it. Carol went somewhere, and I was in constant front of the TV. And I used to love to want to hear what's on TV, but you couldn't because people were trying to talk all the time. So I just kept switching back between the two. I actually like the NFL Network better because Daniel Jeremiah is my favorite analyst. So I thought it was great. I don't know if I'll ever go again. I covered it, and then I wrote about it, and then I did all my talk shows. So it was a blast being able to kind of be a fan right there and watch it with everybody else.
I'm with you. We had a good run of going to the draft, but after a few of them, and then I remember Philadelphia, you couldn't even see the stage, and like just some of that kind of stuff happened. So yeah, it's actually I'd imagine for you a nice break. I was curious if you saw much of Bill Belichick on the McAfee broadcast, or if you saw much of Nick Saban on the College Game Day broadcast. I thought both were excellent, and just to think that we have both of those minds now that are going to be relaxed and free and loose and commenting on their areas of expertise, I think that's going to be pretty special. I'm not a big media fan, but I do think that was pretty cool seeing those guys do their thing on the broadcast.
Craig, I watched both of them. I've always liked Saban because we knew Saban was going to be on ESPN when he retired because he was on there so much. He understood the value of being on ESPN and Pat McAfee's show because so many young people watch it, so many parents watch it, and it always helped him recruit. And I knew Belichick was going to be good. A lot of people didn't think he would because they only seen standing up in front of the media with the Patriots when he's awful. But I've been around him, like on the Centennial Pro Football Hall of Fame committee. I was one of 10 from our selection committee on there with people like Bill Belichick, John Madden, and Gil Brandt, and Bill. And on our Friday conference calls, he was outstanding. And then when we went to Canton for 2 days before we picked that Centennial Committee candidate, he was outstanding. So it doesn't surprise me at all. And there was a 30 for 30 one time, or an NFL Network show. It was with Saban and Belichick just talking football. I would love to see those guys talking football anytime I could.
Yeah, I thought that was Monday when we went on the air, I said, who was the star of the show in the NFL draft? And of course, you could think of players or even a team. There's no question Saban had me locked in. And I even went back and watched more clips of him. I've always enjoyed him. He was fantastic. And the Belichick with a sense of humor that most people never had a chance to see.
One of the things about Saban, I'm looking at him and his coloring. He's got his tan, and his hair was almost the color of his tan. And they put him in the power chair in the middle where he should be because he's Nick Saban. And I always like to look at those guys' hair, their makeup, and everything else. And but I love the idea of College Game Day being there. I thought that was a real coup because I try to watch College Game Day every week because I learn more about college football from watching those guys for 3 hours every week. And but Belichick's going to be a star too if he wants to be. And I feel bad for him. They didn't get another head coaching job. But I think if he wants to do that full time, I'm guessing he doesn't. Tell me he's making $20 million a year. When's he going to start spending some of it? And but I'd love to see both of them as much as possible. I think it'd be tremendous. Bring in Belichick a few times a year, put him on the College Game Day panel with Saban, and just everybody else keep quiet. I don't think Pat McAfee could do that. No. But, man, can you talking about two guys that could be the best voices, not just in college football, but football.
Yeah, I think it's going to be awesome having Saban a part of Saturdays and then Belichick doing what he does on Sundays. It's going to be a real treat. As it typically happens, there's already like a 2025 mock draft that's easily found, and I know it's way too early for all of that, John, but I wanted to ask you about Shedeur Sanders. Obviously, there's a lightning rod with that last name and just kind of the Colorado program in general. He's a good player. I don't know that he's anywhere close to great yet, but he obviously has, at least some attention NFL-wise ongoing and a year to play. But I don't know. There was a former player that did a piece with The Athletic and said that when Deion was telling him that he should enter the transfer portal, that this player got tears in his eyes and he was mad and he felt like they never really tried to get to know him, that program, and that Deion was destroying people's confidence and their belief in themselves, and that they simply could have handled it with more compassion. And Shedeur quote tweets it and says, "I don't even remember him, to be honest. Bro had to be mid at best," about this former player. Is that something that NFL scouts will pick up on as far as like a leadership thing, or does that matter at all what a random tweet says, a year out from getting drafted?
It's a body of work, and Shedeur Sanders is not going to be for everybody. How many players go over and wave their Rolex watch in the faces of opposing fans after a game? How many people have a Rolex watch to wave? That kid, everything that comes out of his mouth can turn off a lot of people. And just like his dad, but he seems to be going to great lengths. He's a great player. Hopefully they get better talent around him next year and get some linemen in there. But as far as him, early mock draft being number one, what was it, 3 years ago when Spencer Rattler was number one after his red shirt, his freshman year at Oklahoma. So many things can go wrong. But I tell you what, there's some teams, they'll never say this, of course, but they're not going to like his antics. I've never seen a quarterback do the kind of things that he's done to rub people's faces in it, teammates in it. I can't believe his dad had lassoed him in a little bit to say, son, okay, your future's at stake now. You might think about cooling some of that stuff. Focus on the season and get ready for the next level.
Yeah, that there'll be some teams with a red flag on that. The talent does trump the red flag. We saw that with T'Vondre Sweat, who got picked in the second round with thoughts it might go into the weekend after the DUI. But Shedeur can play. But yeah, that just is, to me, that whole thing is just it's not necessary. It's just why say that?
His daddy didn't even do those kind of things that he's doing, and I can't believe Deion doesn't step in and show the kind of leadership the head coach should. And because next season, it's going to be his last season and everybody's expecting him to be the first pick, and he's got the ability, start acting like a guy who's picked first overall.
John, thank you very much. John McClain, Hall of Fame.
Thank you, guys. Sick 'em Bears.
Hall of Fame member, also voter in the NFL and a part Baylor, Waco trip, all that.
Yeah.